Welcome to Questions of Fire, and I'm your host, Jonathan McGuinness, for an exciting podcast to do with driven people. Welcome to all the new people who've just joined the group, and today is very, very exciting for me. As I started this journey just over 6 months ago of setting up podcasts with people who are driven, I didn't realize who I actually already knew and had in my network. I have a passion since my second son was eight years of age. We bought him a course to go sailing. We didn't realize that little thing of buying a course for him and his brother would change the way we look at life. The week after, they were having so much fun, I went and did the same thing. That's now over 12 years ago, and it's a great passion of mine, sailing in every regard. I have a huge dream, which is to bring my family on the Atlantic Rally crossing. And that seems like a long way away from me. And little did I know, someone who I worked with just recently in Switzerland, a fantastic guy who I'm going to introduce you to now, has sailed all the way from the bottom of South Africa through the equator up to the northern hemisphere and finally ending up in Paris. Let's welcome today and say thank you very much to Donald Pudney. Donald, thank you very much for joining the podcast.
Hi, Jonathan. Pleasure. And looking forward to the show.
Brilliant, brilliant. Well, we're starting with really, it's a long journey from someone who has no background to self in, and then suddenly it becomes a passion, and now I have a much bigger dream. And what you've even done, going from South Africa to Paris, is absolutely extraordinary. First of all, can I ask, how did you even get it? Do you have a family history? How did you get into the idea of sailing before this big venture even happened, Donald?
Do I have a history of sailing? I grew up in Port Elizabeth, which is known, besides being the friendly city, as the windy city in South Africa. So if you lived there, you were around windsurfers, Hobie cats, sailboats all the time because the wind just blew all the time. I used to sail Hobie cats and windsurfers a lot, and that was just me personally. From my parents, my dad used to get saved on a regular basis from drifting out to sea because he was not very good at sailing.
Okay. And so, that's a start, and it's lovely. I think it must have been a fabulous childhood or growing up in that sort of environment. Why, someone's going to go from South Africa to Europe. Normally they're going to do a thing called buy some plane tickets, man. Well, why did you go different?
Well, I think exactly that reason. Everyone was buying plane tickets, and I hadn't met very many people who had done the sailing trip. And for me, it was just something different to do. I didn't want to go the normal route.
All right, okay. And so then when you made on the journey, maybe let's get into the journey itself, Donald. I'd be curious about how we would do that. Where did you start, and how did you build up to getting ready for it to start with,
So I think just getting ready to start was, I was working at Price Waterhouse in South Africa, and I was coming to the end of my articles and looking for the next step. And as a young South African at those stages, you could get a 2-year working holiday visa for the UK.
Okay.
I had never been overseas, and it was something that I wanted to do. The route wasn't actually in my mind until one day I heard of a family looking for somebody to help them sail. And I then it started to prick my interest. And I didn't actually end up sailing with that family, but that was when the seed was first planted.
Yeah, go ahead.
Mm-hmm. I had to, at that stage, in terms of getting a yacht master or one of the qualifications, in terms of the timeline that I had, I didn't have enough time to do that, the whole course, and get the practical side of it, to get that certificate. So I decided to do a navigator's certification, and did that in a couple of months, and then was allowed to actually take a boat onto the open ocean.
Oh, fantastic! Who did you do this on your own? Did you team up with people? You know, what was the sort of taking on something like that? You know, it's a big thing. So, how did you decide you were going to approach the journey?
I was going to go with a family, and about 2 weeks before that journey was meant to leave, the grandmother or mother of the father of that passed away, sadly, and that trip got cancelled. So I ended up looking for another boat that was going, and the family heard that I was looking. They were going and looking for somebody to help them, and we got paired up and
Oh,
took it from
brilliant,
there.
brilliant. So, with their journey was just happened to be going in a similar direction. They had in mind this same journey that you were thinking about, all the way up to Europe.
Absolutely, they were looking to leave South Africa and take the boat for cruising on the canals of France.
Oh,
That
fantastic!
was their objective.
Brilliant, brilliant. So you know, now you've got a starting point. You've got a team. You've got a boat. You've got skills. I think very much since I've been learning about sailing, every day you go out is almost like a project. You know, you have to make sure you have a checklist of things. You have supplies for every little trip along the way. But I can't imagine planning for that amount of trips. I'll go on a day or a 2 or a 3 day, and it's quite easy. But you know, this is an extended trip. How did that planning and setup and almost project management, I would call it, of the team and what you had to be ready for to go come about, Donald?
So there is a lot of investigation at the beginning, but it's
Yeah,
not the full trip because it is broken up. You are stops along the way. There's certain
yeah,
elements that you can get on those stops, not everything. So you just need to work out which ones you can't get at those specific islands or stops,
yeah,
and you work around it. The ocean also provides fresh fish and stuff like that. Um, but the boat that I was on was it was called Sunrise Star, and is an Angus Primrose 36-foot, which is not very large, 12 meters for the decimal people.
so that'd be almost the minimum size you would need for a big journey, Donald, wouldn't it? It'd be on the smaller size for people who would be taking that type of voyage.
There are some crazy people in the world who have sailed in a much smaller open boat all the way around the world. There's people who have swum. There are people who have gone with windsurfers in places. So this is a small boat, but it is by no means a crazy feat.
Brilliant. Okay, well, you know, that's easy for you to say. You've done it, Donald. But maybe you can start to walk us through the maybe different steps of the journey, Donald, as you were doing it, you know?
Perfect, I will do. And you've had some experience. Just for people who don't know sailing and terminology, I just would like to start off with some of the terminology that I will be using throughout the discussion. On the
Brilliant.
left, we've got the Beaufort scale, which is 0 to 12 on the Beaufort scale. And when I talk about force 8, 9, and 10, you'll see them down in the orange, coming on red areas. Force 10 is not something that is often seen on land. And if it is, you certainly know about it. There are the storms that you would have experienced, but they are very far and few between. Even the gale and strong gale, on land, there can be huge structural damages from those amounts of wind.
Okay.
On the right-hand side, I'm just going to start out with a word most of you have heard. Not sure if you all know the origins of word, but the word posh stands for port, out, starboard, home. And those were the expensive cabins on the boats that used to sail from England around to India, and then back from India back to England. So on the return journey, the cabins that had a view on the land, so the starboard side, they were the expensive cabins. And our entire journey had Africa to the starboard side of the boat. Just in terms of, a lot of you have heard of miles, which is normally 1.6 kilometers to a mile. A nautical mile or sea mile is actually 1.852 kilometers per mile. And countries' international waters, a country's boundary goes to 12 miles offshore. And international waters, you're allowed to sail and do whatever you like. The moment you come into this 12-mile range, you need to announce yourself to waters you're allowed to the coast guard. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, where did we go? Port Elizabeth, down in the bottom side, in the middle of South Africa. From Port Elizabeth to Cape Town, St. Helena Island, Ascension Island, Cape Verde, Azores, along the south coast of England, and to Paris was the route that we took.
Mm-hmm.
And this was 190 days in total.
Wow.
With 73 days and nights at sea, covering 15,500 kilometers.
Wow. Okay. That's that's a significant. That's halfway around the world, effectively.
Yes.
The equator, as I know, is 40,000, so it's just under halfway around the entire planet. That's fantastic.
Yeah. That on the excitement side, that included one knockdown, and a knockdown is when basically the sail is flat on the water, the boat is on its side, and the waves are washing over the top of you. So we had one of those 17 hours into the trip. Oh. We had 2 separate days of force 10 and 9 continuous days of force 8 and 9 coming directly from in front, where we made around 300 nautical miles forward in those 9 odd days. We had 7 days of motoring in the doldrums, and if you calculate the average speed, that's 4.75 knots, you're talking about 8 kilometers an hour, which is not very fast. It's a very slow run or a jog speed that we traveled at.
Maybe I just ask you then, Donald, about the knockdown, or we'd call it maybe a capsize would be the term I would normally use, and I could be wrong in using that term. Was it at a point that you thought, hold on, we have lost the boat, we may have to stop this, or it was something somehow temporary, if you don't mind?
So this happened 17 hours into the trip after leaving Cape Town. And I will actually, I'll move on to the next slide.
Okay.
And cover that point in a moment. Why did I do this? You asked me that earlier. And this was actually just following my dreams. The company I was working for said, why don't I stay on? I was adding value, and they would actually buy me a plane ticket to fly later. But this was a dream. It had become a dream of mine, and I wanted to do it. And I got similar pushback from my parents, my friends, the family. All of them thought I was going to Davy Jones's locker at the bottom of the ocean. But the life lessons I learned on this trip, and you'll see the second point there, believe the weather forecasters. There had been a storm forecast for Cape Town, and the owner of the boat, pictured below, he was just in a hurry. He just wanted to go. And we had our first, how would we say, challenging time in that discussion where I recommended staying and he wanted to go. Being the owner of the boat, we eventually followed his rules. And 17 hours into the trip, the storm hit. At that stage, we had about 1 to 2 square meters of sail up just to give some stability, but we were in force 10 immediately. And force 10 is not only a massive amount of wind, it comes with waves that are actually breaking. And what you can do is you basically clipped on, you're wearing your storm gear, you are steering the boat as close to directly into the waves as possible to go through. And we had got knocked by one wave, which put us sideways on. A gust took us and a wave went over the top. But if the hatches are not completely battened down, then that was a very real situation where you could lose the boat. But if all of them are battened down, the chance of enough water getting in to sink it is very, very small. And the boat with a very heavy keel, and you loosen the sail, does actually right itself again.
Okay. So yeah, obviously then as well, you know, it's not just about the boat and the potential knockdown at that stage. You had somebody that you think, okay, well, I'm 1 day in or 17 hours in, we've had a knockdown. Should I give up, go back and get the plane? What were your thoughts then, Donald?
You do question, you do start to question this, but once that storm had passed, which was about a 12-hour storm that we had there.
Oh wow!
It was calm again, well, as calm as it gets in South African waters, but generally calm, and we could continue sailing. It was during the light of the next day that we saw a lot of the damage that had happened to all the stuff that is somehow roped to the boat. That I think Basil and Susan and the family were a whole lot more nervous about the rest of the trip than I was. And one of the main reasons was they were continuously seasick in rough waters.
Okay. Wow, what a start to the big trip, huh? 1 day in and boom.
It was certainly a learning experience. Yeah, but you live and learn, and we were better positioned for much later on in the trip because of that experience.
Brilliant.
Just one of the last point on here was, as I mentioned, a 12-meter length overall. It's only about 3.5 meters at the widest point.
Okay.
And four people and a violin can exist in that smaller space for a long time. It can be a little bit tricky, though, I will admit.
So I'm used to 2 of my boys were violin players, and after a couple of years, that's a beautiful thing, Donald. But if somebody's a beginner violinist, that can scratch your brain, not just your ears. I'm hoping you had a reasonably well trained violinist on board.
Reasonably trained, definitely. She is actually a professional violinist now. However, to become a reasonable violinist, you still need to practice scales on a regular basis, and that can scratch your ears, as you say. Yes.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, excellent. All right. Well, that's the confines of the resources that you had. This 12 meters, 4 people, and a scaling violin. So
Ex-
off you get up after the knockdown, and what happens next now?
Well, 14 days of sailing, following wonderful instruments, took us to St. Helena. One thing I did learn, and after my course, I had practiced a lot with a
Yeah.
sextant, even on standing on dry land, finding your location with absolutely no moving parts is quite a difficult thing to do. In a moving boat that is constantly moving, and the sun is often, it's not always, but there's often a grey sky. Finding your bearing with a sextant is virtually impossible. I learned that very quickly.
So a quick question then, Donald, because I radar. What technology level did you have in 1995? Since you're mentioning sextants.
So we did have radar. We had a Faruma radar. We had GPS, and there was a second plotter as well for positioning.
Okay. Oh, you fantastic then, really.
And these do have a global map, so you do put in your waypoint, and obviously at the stern you can see just where my cursor is here. There's a wooden board, and that's an autopilot, a manual autopilot, and that gets set on the course that you want and the angle of the wind. And as the wind angle changes, the board either gets blown flatter or goes further upright, and each of those hydraulically control the rudder, and that keeps you back to the same course again.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so technology was, I didn't know to what level it had advanced, but it was already quite efficient at that stage.
It was, yes, and we did have a electric autopilot, but that broke after about the first 15 minutes. As we've heard many other stories, in that time they just were not able to handle the weight of many of the yachts, and we went back to the manual version, which then was with us for the rest of the trip.
Okay.
But yep, 14 days later, we got to the island of St. Helena, which is pictured both top left and bottom left. And this is the capital of St. Helena. It's Jamestown.
Lovely.
In 95, when we were there, the only way to get to this island was via yacht or by a Royal Mail ship, which covered St. Helena, Ascension, the Gokha Island, which is down south, and then back to the UK, as St. Helena and Ascension Island are both protectorates of the UK. And there's 4,500 people on the island, and it was where Napoleon was sent to in a place called Beaufort House after he escaped from Elba, and he actually died in St. Helena.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
And in St. Helena, there's, well, at that stage, basically, you've used up all of your fresh food and you've used up quite a lot of the frozen food. So you would then spend a good couple of days either exploring, just getting rid of your sea legs again, and provisioning for the next leg of the journey as well.
Okay, fantastic. So did you enjoy the island itself?
It was an absolutely fantastic place. Because it is so remote, there is zero crime. So if you go into a shop, you leave your wallet, by the time you 2 shops, a restaurant or something later, they would have seen the wallet, found out that it was the foreigner's wallet, and it would be waiting for you in the shop that you went into next.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
It was the most peaceful culture that I think I've ever come across. And in, I think it was 3 years ago, they've opened up an airport there, which I hope doesn't change the way of life too much.
Oh, okay. Okay. Lovely. Sounds fantastic.
So 14 days were spent on St. Helena, and then we got back on the boat. Well, we were staying on the boat, but it was time to depart and headed off for Ascension Island, which was about 10 days sailing to get there. And Ascension Island is remote. We're talking middle of nowhere. It is also a volcanic island and completely flat. It is actually plays quite an important role in world space travel and positioning. So it has a massive Air Force base, which is an alternate landing site for the space shuttle. And it was the jump-off station when the UK was at war with the Falkland Islands. Many of the sorties or flown were flown from Ascension Island.
Okay. Okay. So it's a very strategic point from a military perspective then as well.
Correct. It is also one of the world's largest sea protected zones are in the area, and the leatherback turtles love it for it's one of their breeding sites. It also has one of the best cinemas that I've ever been to, which is basically a concrete wall on top of the edge of a cliff, and the backdrop is either 1,500 kilometers of ocean or a night sky with more stars than you've ever seen in your entire life before.
Oh, you're just not going to beat that, Donald. Huh?
Yeah. Yep, and you're only allowed to stay there. At our stage, it was three nights or 3 days actually. But I know that does change, and there's not a lot of people. I think there's something like 600 to 700 people on the island. Most of them work in either the provisioning or in the Air Force base. So there's just not a lot there.
Fair enough. Okay. Wonderful.
Yes, and that was up. So that trip took 10 days to get to Ascension, and it was really easy sailing generally on a broad reach, and you're sailing in the trade winds. So just day in and day out, you're just sailing at a constant speed. You set the sails once, you check them a few times per day, check your course, but in general, you're just sailing along, and that's really nice sailing.
So just on that, Donald, obviously when you're going to go a long distance, I guess you coordinate in terms of maybe taking shifts. You know, you've got day and night, and how did you guys sort of alternate between you to manage the direction and sailing?
Me being the lackey, the youngster on board, I got the 12 o'clock till 5 o'clock shift in the middle of the night. Then I would sleep. We would have breakfast or something. I would take an early afternoon shift as well, and then I would sleep from whenever it got dark till about 12 o'clock when I was woken for my next shift again. That was actually not so difficult to handle. and being alone under a night sky where there's nothing, there is no light pollution. It is just beautiful to see. And if you're not seeing things in the sky, you get the phosphorescence as dolphins or whales are swimming next to the boat, or
Oh, lovely.
it is just a spectacular out there.
And I suppose here's a kind of internal question, Donald. Do you find a peace within yourself, or some people are very in need of interaction all the time, but if you're there in the sea all of the time for a long time, how do you change about how you feel about things? What sense could you give us about that?
Well, it definitely changed my views on being alone and being lonely. That was definitely one of them. The second one is, it's just you. You need to make decisions, and they have consequences, and you have to live with those consequences. So both of these things, I think, for me, I was already 25, so you can consider that sort of grown up. But both of these items definitely helped form who I am today, and were very different to a hyperactive youngster that grew up always on the go and always surrounded by people.
So this wasn't just a transit then, Donald, it was some form of transformation also happened during the trip.
I mean, absolutely. It's half a year of your life where you are in a small space. Even though it's very beautiful, it's still a small space. If you get upset, you can't just leave and go to the shop. You have to sort it out.
Absolutely. Fantastic.
Yeah. So I think this next part of the journey was actually between Ascension and Cabo Verde was definitely our most challenging. We were 3-4 days into the journey. We were about 5-6 days into the journey when we were completely and utterly becalmed, and we had hit the doldrums. And when I talk becalmed, in the middle of the ocean, you can see, well, you can't see that far, but the closest land is 1,500-2,000 kilometers in any direction. And the sea is like a mirror. It is absolutely dead flat. There's not a single ripple. There's no wind. There's no nothing. And at that stage, we started to motor. We weren't just going to sit around and wait. One thing which is also a learning experience is if you've got extra long-range fuel tanks and the skipper says that he filled all of them, do a double check, because
okay,
when you only fill one of them and you motor for about 5-6 days, 7 days, and you suddenly run out of fuel, that makes life a little bit more challenging.
Absolutely.
Yes, and that definitely, for a life experience, even if somebody says they've done something, check it and make sure that they have actually done it.
So you tend to double and triple check things now then, I imagine.
I do. And that has definitely stood me well in my project management type roles as well. And as we got out of the doldrums, we went straight into a second storm, and this was the 9 days, and it varied between force 8 to force 10.
Mm-hmm.
During that time, the lady, Susan, had bumped her head on something down below, and it was about towards the end of that trip, we spotted RMS Dumbarton Castle, which is a Navy frigate that was on its way down to the Falkland Islands for a patrolling. and we radioed them. They came about and came next to us and put a doctor. They brought us fresh food. They brought us fresh fruit, and brought us a couple of tanks of fuel, which saw us on our way again, which was absolutely wonderful of them. And off they set. We thought we'd never ever see them again, but I'll come back to them slightly later on in the speech later.
Oh, fantastic! That was like winning the lotto, them giving you the extra fuel, etc. Huh?
It was wonderful, and it just goes to show that at sea, one of the main lessons there is when somebody's in trouble, people rally together and help each other out, not expecting anything back, but that always comes back at some other stage.
That's what I was just about to say. That, Donald, is I've been a member of a sailing club, etc., and people come and go from all parts of the world. And even if someone is just there for one day or one night or one meal, there's just this sort of generosity and sharing and helpfulness among the community, or that's what I found, you know.
It's definitely the case, and especially on the open ocean for people doing longer trips, it is just you alone. And if you are only for yourself and not helping other people, then you're just not going to survive it. This is a community, and it's quite a close-knit community. Different people, different backgrounds, different religions, different cultures, but they all join together with the love of sailing and actually seeing the world.
Brilliant.
Yep. I'm not actually going to go into too much detail about the Cape Verde Islands, and nor the Azores, except if anyone is looking for a holiday in the North Atlantic, the 9 Azorean Islands are absolutely spectacular and definitely worth a visit. You can fly directly from Lisbon to there, and I'm not being paid by the Azorean Tourist Authority.
It'll be on the.
Sorry, I didn't get that.
Bucket list, Donald.
Yes, on the bucket list. Yeah. Jonathan, just moving on. So after leaving the Azores, the Lizard, the southwest corner of the UK, was a wonderful sight. And actually coming in that direction, when we got to 12 miles offshore, we had to radio to the UK Coast Guard that we were arriving. And this was about 3.5 months after we had met RMS Dumbarton Castle, because we had spent some time on the Azores and then the rest of the trip as well. Maybe it was even 4 months later.
Wow.
And we called up to the Coast Guard, and they then, a voice returned back over saying, sunrise star, just hold your position. This is RMS Dumbarton Castle again, which was the ship had come back and was doing fishery patrol duties in the UK waters now. And they were in the area. They came sailing past us and did a whole flag salute with all the crew that was on duty, giving us a salute as they sailed past, which was wonderful.
That's a privilege, Donald. Absolutely.
And then learnings from the UK waters that are completely different from South Africa was we have tidal ranges of maybe 0.5 meter, in some areas maybe up to 1 meter, but in the UK it can be up to 5 meters. So one thing you need to learn very quickly is when you moor on floating bollards as opposed to mooring on a firm bollard, because you might go into town and come back and find your boat is 3-4 meters above the water, and not to be recommended.
Absolutely.
Well, we bounced across the south coast of England and then sailed across via Cherbourg to the mouth of the Seine, which we stopped at a tiny little town called Honfleur, which is a beautiful little French village right at the mouth of the Seine. And you can see that in the picture below that the mast has already been stepped.
Yeah.
And this is required in order to get this size yacht all the way to Paris, because up to the town of Rouen, you can go with the mast still erect, but after Rouen it has to be stepped, otherwise you just can't make it.
Okay, when you did mention Paris, I didn't know how you got there. That explains it. Thanks.
Yeah, so this was all the way up the Seine, and at this stage it's clearly just motoring, but you're motoring, you're going through a whole number of locks as you gain height from the sea, and stopping in beautiful little villages along the Seine. And I actually got off the boat in a town just short of Paris called Giverny, which is where Monet's Monet's house and lily pond are, and it's definitely more famous for that than my goodbye. But that was where I left the boat after 7 wonderful months and sailed in a peniche into Paris. So I did actually go all the way to Paris by water.
Brilliant. Oh, absolutely brilliant. Thanks for walking us through the whole journey, Donald. That was quite amazing, and I probably even afterwards have more ideas and places I would like to go. I just have one sort of last question for you, Donald. Since you've been through such a big and long voyage, and also there's been several years since, if you had to give advice to a younger person now around either taking on a big adventure, just in life, because you're the type of person who takes on those things, I'd really be interested to hear, what would you say to the young Donald if he were, you could talk to that pre-25-year-old, that 18-year-old. What one piece of advice might you give to him, Donald?
I give a few pieces of advice. On a non-sailing advice, I would go buy property cleverly and early. Second one would be learn about compounding interest early. And third would be make your own adventures in life and don't be put off by your friends, your family, your work colleagues, because all of them will only tell you about the negative things, the bad things that happen. Even though none of them have done it, they've all got friends of friends who have done it, and they've only heard the bad things that have happened. I think just go for it, evaluate the risks, put whatever mitigation strategies you have into place, and just take the chance. Live life to the fullest.
Fantastic, Donald. For taking out the time and walking us through what many people would dream to do, and also, on a very practical level, what you said there at the end applies to all of us. So thank you very, very much for taking the time. It's been a privilege, and I'm delighted to know about these extra jewels in the people that I already know. Sometimes there are wonderful things that you don't know about them yet. So thank you very much for sharing, Donald.
Thank you for inviting me. And people have my contacts. Please feel free to reach out if they have further questions as well.
Wonderful. I recommend that you do reach out to Donald. He's very open, fantastic communicator. And for those of you who aren't, please subscribe, and we'll have more interesting and dynamic people like Donald as time goes forward. Thank you very much, Donald. Take care.
Thank you. Good night.